everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the very first episode of
Tag and Bag.
Come on, that's what we're here for right now. Thanks everyone for jumping onto this brand new project. I'm joined by the prolific, incredibly talented Jeff Steitzer. Jeff, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this and for indulging me in my sort of wacky concept for what this podcast is going to hopefully become. Really appreciate you giving up the time. So thank you so much.
Absolutely my pleasure. I'm delighted to be here to chat.
Well, actually, there's again, beautifully helped me with my segue there. We first connected several years ago when I had the opportunity to interview you. And I'd always had in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could create an almost sort of generational perspective across a short form podcast where we discuss contemporary issues, things facing the games industry and the sort of wider creative arts industry. And you very kindly indulged me in my wacky pitch, and that's kind of led us to today. I know that recently you've been really connecting with a lot of your fan base, particularly those that know you from your work on Halo as the multiplayer announcer. And I was just wondering if you could maybe just catch some people up if they're not perhaps aware of what you've been working on recently or what's been going on. I know you've been really, really busy the last few months. Just give everyone a little flavor of kind of where you're at.
Well, in terms of personal stuff, I had to move from an
Mm,
apartment I was in to a house because of all sorts of issues with the apartment complex. And I have also been working on a website, which I launched last Thursday. Throughout most of my career, I have been, I would say, primarily a theater person,
mm.
being an actor and director on stage. I'm not doing that anymore for a variety of reasons. One of the most important being is that, as Judi Dench once said when asked what was the quality most necessary to sustain a career in the theater, she said, energy. And the idea of doing 8 shows a week now is not quite as attractive as it once was. In
Absolutely.
addition, there was a time when I first started where I was making all sorts of friends and getting to work with them over and over and over again. And as circumstances have changed and shows are getting smaller,
Mm.
many of my friends have left the business. That is not happening nearly as much. So I've kind of decided to sort of put that away for probably for good. Still available in case a film or a TV episode or something comes up, which occasionally it does. I still do commercials. More recently, in the last couple of years, I've been doing cameos, which I love. They're great fun to do. And I've also been showing up at expos and fan conventions. I've done about 5 of those, most recently this past weekend here in Seattle. We had
Brilliant.
one.
It's such a great opportunity for people to connect with you because I think you've had clearly an impact on a lot of people, particularly my generation growing up, where you know your voice, your as we've as I've referred to them before, your sort of dulcet tones. We've regularly been murdering each other to them for a long time, and I think that now, given the fact that you've refocused your energy in your career to the things that you know really you're passionate about and things you definitely want to pursue, the fact that you've now got an opportunity to really connect with your fan base, this is actually partly also where this idea came from. I think it's a really lovely opportunity for you in a slightly more long form format to connect with people and share your perspective. I know it's something I'm grateful for and something I think that others will be interested in listening to. So it's lovely just to hear that you've been able to continue to shape the arc of your career from a place of genuine passion and care. And like you said, you know, connecting with fans does seem to be something that's been both a joy for you, but also a surprise. Is that sort of fair to say in terms of the
Very, very
nature of
fair to
that?
say. Yeah, very, very fair to say. The thing that's really great when you're on stage, you don't see the audience if you're
No.
lucky. And certainly when you're filming, the people who are going to eventually see you in a movie or a TV show, you have no connection with them whatsoever. Even doing cameos, I get a request to do something for somebody's birthday, but I'm not going to meet those people. So when I go to a convention, I actually do meet the fans of the game I've been involved with very much one to one. And that I love because, you can respond to them and their interests. And the things that they want to know about the game and about you and all that kind of stuff. It's more of a conversation, which
Mm.
is certainly more interested than just throwing stuff at folks and hoping that maybe they'll find it interesting. It's easier for me to like get questions and go, oh, well, yeah, I've got a story about that. And, that's great. And I love meeting the fans. It's been incredibly gratifying.
Yeah.
What I say, often very humbling. I did not know for the longest time that we even had fans in the
See
game.
that that's fascinating for me to hear that, just because obviously I'm more on very much on the consumer side, right? Like I've experienced your work, in its end form, right? Whereas I
Yeah.
suppose I'd always made perhaps just the assumption that you would have an awareness of that and that you would know that sort of the indelible mark you've left on the games industry. And it's where I think the topic for our first podcast today, we're going to be talking about the advent of AI and the implications of that on voice acting and game development. I think it's
Right.
never been more relevant, particularly when you consider how, take your role in Halo, for instance, right? The fact that you have this gigantic body of work that could so easily be sampled by an AI generator or a sophisticated program that could then replicate that. Has that ever
Mhm.
been something that's crossed your path in terms of like something you're concerned about career wise, that you could potentially find yourself in a position where they go, well, actually, whether it's because of ballooning development costs or because of scope becoming too big, that actually we could just replicate your performance with an AI sample of something? Is that something
Well,
that's ever
so far, I
concerned you?
don't think that it's sophisticated enough to really be able to do that.
Right.
I don't really know. I don't think anybody really knows, where this might eventually end up. And as a result, I think it's given rise to an awful lot of panic and fear
I
and,
agree.
hysteria, which I'm not inclined to indulge in if I can
Mm,
help it, because I just don't know whether or not it's going to become so good that I could be replaced. Now, if the union gets on the ball and, works out some sort of a way where people could do that and I would still be reimbursed, it's like, yeah, go for it.
sure. At the end
Use
of the
my voice
day,
all you want to.
yeah, because I suppose
It's not
ultimately
like it's,
then your livelihood's being protected, but just in a different form, right? It's a
yeah, I
different
mean,
way of
that's
doing
always
that.
been one of the big concerns, is that there it's a very interesting thing being a performer, being an actor, because the reimbursement that we tend to get is not nearly as wonderful as most people think. I mean, yes, if you're a superstar, if you're a Tom Cruise,
Mm,
you bet you're worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. I've been watching this Steve Martin documentary, and there's one thing that was at least on
mm.
YouTube where he's sitting and talking to Martin Short about comedy and their stuff, and there's a huge window behind them that looks out over Manhattan, and you think, yeah, that'd be nice, but
You've
that,
ascended to that point.
yeah, I mean, that only sort of happens for a relatively small portion of the
Right.
acting community. So, I think really it's just a matter of making sure that one can keep on living. That's the concern. But as far as like, making a fortune, that isn't really the point. Most of us who do it, especially who've been doing theater, sort of came into it knowing that we weren't going to become very, very wealthy. But you do still want to be recompensed.
Of course. And
And
it
you
yeah.
also want to make sure that the way your voice is being used isn't going to be offensive or inappropriate, or
Right.
that's my only big concern about AI, really.
Yeah, that I think partly, I think some of the fear, given what you acknowledged there, that there is so many unknowns, there's so many things that there aren't perhaps clear in terms of extrapolating the potential future of where the technology will evolve. A lot of perhaps any anxiety or concern that exists, I think, is through misuse. Not a
Yeah.
developer simply cutting costs or an indie team suddenly being able to include voice acting, whereas perhaps they couldn't have the budget or scope to achieve that. It's
Yeah.
less that, I think, and more the idea of people's voices being used inappropriately or being co-opted to create sort of false versions of themselves.
Oh,
It's interesting too, I think, because let's look at your work on Halo, for example. I was curious how much, for example, how much direction were you given when you were doing the medals and the lines as the Halo announcer? Were you given a great deal of specificity in terms of how to perform the lines?
no. Not only that, I wasn't often told exactly what I was saying. So and for many of the medals, it's kind of like, I don't know what I'm saying, but no one's making me go back and do it again. The way I would record was I'd be given a page. It's different now because I just look on a monitor, a TV monitor, but I used
Mm.
to have pieces of paper um, on a stand, a music
Whoa.
stand. I know, wild. And then what I would do is I would read each phrase or word or line, whatever it was, 3 times, and I would do a run on it. So I would do a section. So if I was going to do, like, blue team, go, red team, go, it'd be blue team, go, blue team, go, blue
Right.
team, go, and I'd go down a certain portion of the page. And then the writer who was there with the engineer would say, okay, let's go back on line 6, give me 3 more. And that was about all it was, a little faster, I heard
Mm.
fairly often, because it's fair to say that perhaps I do tend to like to make a meal of these phrases. And, meanwhile, gameplay is racing ahead of, whatever nonsense that I'm doing with
Yeah,
work.
Jeff, we're stacking these
But
medals up, buddy. We need to we need to get this
exactly,
moving.
people do need to go home at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's they never gave me a whole lot of direction. That was kind of settled up front
Mm.
when I worked with Marty O'Donnell on creating the voice, because we went into it not really knowing what it was going to be. And I think the first thing, as I recall, and Marty has never disputed this, that I recall doing, is being told Monster Truck Rally. That was where we started.
Right.
Sunday, Sunday, blah, 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 that kind of a thing. And then I had done in my audition, I think, a little bit of an alien who was a little bit more malevolent. And so when you put that together with some of that stuff, you get unfreaking believable. That it's not that
But
simple.
there is that sort of snarl to it, isn't there? There is that kind
Oh yeah,
of
yeah.
edge to it, and that would it be fair to say then, at least whether it was from the beginning or sort of as you progressed through the series, you felt you were able to put your stamp on it. There was an element of like you said, giving multiple versions of a line reading, and then they kind of pieced together the one that they would settle on.
They absolutely chose what,
Right.
what one they wanted to use. So I had no control over that whatsoever. That's not unusual. It's different on stage, because when you're out on stage, once you go out there in front of the audience, there's nothing anybody can
Yeah,
do.
you
The
making your
director
choices.
can't
Yeah.
give you a note like they would in rehearsal. I mean, you're in charge of your performance. On film and TV or in recording, they can cut it up, splice it up, put the beginning at the end and the end. I mean, they can do it whatever they want. Um, and in some instances, I think that is sort of what happened, was they chose things that, you know, they liked and that I didn't really have any say over. But, the people have been so nice, and it's like, okay, well, they can hear it. I can't, I
Mm,
mean, I have these, but that doesn't mean that I'm really hearing it like somebody who plays the game from the
of course.
outside.
Yeah, in the context of when it will then be used, right? That is a different flavor. But it
Absolutely.
proves, I think, you talking that through proves that there is such a need for the human component, for there to be that sort of creative iteration that I'm
Yeah.
not sure. You spoke earlier about the idea that AI perhaps isn't sophisticated enough to achieve the equivalency of a real life performance. I certainly
No,
don't think that it is in a position to iterate in the way that you've just spoken to there.
no, no, not at all. The best example, as far as I'm concerned, is think about these Star Wars films where they've taken an
Right.
actor who's dead and basically tried to give a performance through footage that they had archived of
Mm.
them. I don't know about you, but I've never seen anything that looked like a human being or that was in any way close to
No,
being acceptable.
you can
When they
certainly you
euthanize somebody, that's a little bit different.
yeah.
Harrison Ford, the way they made him younger in the last Indiana Jones film, it's like, okay, that's impressive.
Yeah,
You know,
I think you can look at it perhaps and you go, well, that is an interesting technical achievement, but it does, I find, often can pull me out of the moment where perhaps I would be more emotionally connected as an audience member. I'm actually looking at it more from a, well, that was an interesting directing choice, or that was a great use of that tech, but I'm not necessarily then actually necessarily feeling the thing I should be feeling watching that moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to be sitting and going, that's really incredible. How'd they do that? Because then you're not really in the story of whatever the film is trying to convey.
Yeah. And that's, how do you feel about that in terms of that idea of, say, for example, if we get to Halo 12 and it's, in 2060, how would you feel about your voice being sampled in that same way to retain a performance?
Well, here's the problem with that. It seems to me, I think we all have those things that we really, really love.
Right.
Part of the problem is we don't want things to change.
Mm,
The wonderful concert film with Joni Mitchell, because she started out and her sound was kind of folk.
mm.
And eventually over time she began to move more into jazz and her fans didn't want to go there. And there was a concert, I think it's on Shadows and Light, that album, where that the people are screaming out titles of songs they want her to sing, and she makes some comment along the lines of, nobody ever said to Van Gogh, paint Starry Night again, man.
That's a good point.
Things have got to evolve. So it seems to me that, and this is not false modesty. I have
Mm,
no doubt there is somebody out there who could easily do something, if not akin to what I'm doing,
mm.
something new that is every bit as, interesting or exciting or whatever,
Right.
and even quite a bit more. Think about the franchises where the trick is to replace the person. I'm one of those people, I'm old enough to think that Sean Connery is still James Bond, but a lot of
Sure.
people who love Daniel Craig would say, oh no, he's the one. You
Yeah,
know,
that
we
that goes
evolved.
in
Look at Batman, look at all those things.
totally. That goes into a really tricky, very subjective conversation, doesn't it? Because you could look at, say, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man in the
Yep.
MCU, and I would look at that and go, well, that's irreplaceable. That you can't reboot that. He was indelible and identifiable as that part. There'd be the next person that go, yeah, but what about? And then they just laundry list the cast potential of that role. So I suppose that's potentially where AI does segue into kind of murkier waters, which is that, do you end up in a position where you get sort of a rampant fan base not wanting to accept a replacement of the Halo announcer, not wanting to have anyone but you be identified in that role, and the developers then follows through on that and end up just, you know,
Well, I think we've already crossed that Rubicon, because there was one of the games where they added like 3 or 4 other people that you
yeah.
could choose to be your announcer. So they've already kind of dealt with that.
Mm,
And so, I mean, I'm sure at some point down the road they're going to have to face this, because I can't imagine I'm going to be doing this forever.
right.
Uh, I'm at a fairly advanced age at this point. So, as far as using what I've done to try and create, a replicant version of myself, I'm not going to care. I'll be gone. So, I mean, that would be the sort of reason for doing it.
Mm,
That isn't bothering me. I'm a little bit more concerned about those people who are still around and how it might
right.
affect them, because that's basically the thing that seems really sort of wrong-headed and unfair, when you take people who are still in a position to make money with what they do and
Mm.
that's being stolen from them. That doesn't seem right to
Yeah,
me.
because it sort of it removes the art from the artistry, doesn't it? It becomes entirely a commercial proposition. It is, okay, we
Right.
want to
Well, that's very
yeah.
much in terms of what you said. It's, the fact of the matter is that AI is operating on what's already been created. Doesn't really take into account what's going to be created or what would have been created by any individual performer, because
Mm,
everything we do comes out of all of our experiences. And I don't think there's any way to completely catalog that. There may be something from my past that has a huge impact on something I'm doing right now, and you're not
sure.
going to know that because it hasn't had that impact yet. You're not going to be able to sort of deduce that, I don't
No,
think,
because I suppose it
what
could be
you have.
subconscious, couldn't it? It could be an experience
Totally,
you've had that,
totally.
I've certainly had that where if I've been called upon, if I've ever done any theatre work when I was younger and required to perhaps utilize something almost Stanislavskian, bringing in an emotional memory,
Yeah,
I haven't perhaps realized the tools I have in my tool set that sometimes surprise me in the moment because I haven't really realized that, oh, that's why I'm accessing that feeling, or that
yeah,
memory is informing a choice that I'm making. And again, that's something I don't think that an AI can ever truly replace. I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, Jeff, which is this idea that it's responding to what was. It's taking input of data that exists, not creating something unique that's
yeah. It's
original
always
moving
going to be,
forward.
it's always going to be, coming off that. Yeah. I mean, I could be completely wrong. As I say, it's one of these topics that's fascinating, a little bit scary, but of course, we don't know where it's going to go or how it's
No,
going to end. I
no,
will say,
exactly.
I happened to be talking to my brother a couple of days ago, and he said, I think he'd gone online to see if he could find my website, and instead he found some group, 101 Sounds or something, that claimed to be able to, you could write in anything you wanted and get my voice saying it.
Hmm.
So I went to that site, and you know, you type in a line, and I think I just typed in like one of the lines from the game or something, and what came out was terrible. I don't know whether it was the device I was on, whether it would have been better if I had tried that on my laptop, but no, it didn't sound anything at all like me. So at least for now, it seems like they've got a little ways to go
Hmm.
before being used by all kinds of folks for whatever they want to use it for.
Yeah, because that's something I think as well. This logically sort of segues us now into that sort of the professional side of things, where what you've addressed there is obviously just it's a fan that's tried to perhaps with good intention try to make
It
something that
looks
is a
like a
facsimile.
business. I don't know what it is,
Oh,
but it looks
really?
like,
Okay.
oh yeah, it does not look like a fan. It's got a
Oh,
title and
okay.
it offers other people, I
Well, then
think.
that has slightly more dubious overtones to it for me in terms of especially with the way you've described that and that the output was so poor.
Yeah.
That has a slightly more
I don't
concerning, I
think
think.
anyone would go, oh, that's Jeff.
No,
You know,
good. And yeah, and I'd hope that would be immediately obvious to anyone that's looking
yeah.
at that.
Uh,
Has sort of AI or discussions around it ever cropped up in any of the projects you've worked on in recent years in terms of the production side of it, scripting? Has it ever really crossed your path as a working actor, or is it something you've perhaps just been more just aware of in the wider conversation?
I would say the latter.
Okay,
No, it's come up in terms of anything I've done. It's not like somebody said, "Hey, listen, can you read these, ridiculous texts so we can, piece together your sound and we can use it." Nothing like that.
Hmm.
Um, no, I really haven't encountered it yet, and I think a lot of people haven't really encountered it yet. So I think that that's what makes it so daunting for folks is, their worst fears can kind of
Yeah,
create a future where, basically anybody comes along and makes any kind of an impact and, bingo, they're gone. And instead now there's this other, person, actor, voice actor, whatever it is, that's taken their place. But so far, no, it isn't something I think about very often, except when I open up, the computer and go onto the news sites and it seems to be popping up everywhere.
sure. It is
So I
it's
think there are more
certainly.
important things to be talking about right now. But, if we don't deal with certain issues in our world, then it's not going to matter if they can do
No,
AI.
I suppose on the scale of importance, you would consider it relatively low. Certainly, if you're broadening that topic up to sort of wider issues. But I suppose you look at what's happened recently with the actor strikes and the writer strikes, and a lot of that. I know AI was mentioned in terms of how writers
Sure.
and actors are protected, how they are compensated appropriately if AI is used, and I know that it's certainly not an issue that's going to go away, I think, even if it's something that perhaps isn't as prescient and current as of right now in 2024.
I think the problem has been in the past that our unions tend to start thinking about something after the fact, after it's become a problem.
Right.
For instance, when I first started doing Halo, there was no such thing as a royalty or residual check.
Of any kind.
So not at all. Nobody did that. So
Right.
basically you paid a fee for your session and that was it.
And that was self-contained to the time that you'd
It
spent
Yeah,
recording.
that was it.
Right.
You didn't get anything else. If the game went out and sold, a billion copies,
Mm,
all you had was the fee for having recorded that. Now, if they wanted you back, which was the case with Halo, then you could say, well, we'd like a little bit more money in that fee, but it was still just the fee. And a lot of that was the union, I think, didn't understand what a huge market the video games
right.
were going to become. Now this is starting to happen with audiobooks as well, because again, that's like one of the fastest growing parts of our industry. And there are plenty of things that are not nailed down as far as the contracts are concerned for the people who do those. You know, I think though that seems to be more often what happens is that
Mm.
it's only when it starts to become a problem that, you know, a lot of people start to think, oh, we should address this.
Yeah, this is something that needs to be,
Yeah.
there isn't a rule for this. Let's make one kind of thing. It is
Mm,
it sounds to
mm,
me like it's almost like the speed bump logic, right? They'll put speed bumps in the road after a major accident. And
absolutely.
would you,
Absolutely.
you'd think that given the fact that it is something that has, it's not been an instant thing. It has been a slow burn and it's very much an emerging technology. But it does feel like despite that, it's not been a rapid uptake, I don't think. It's not suddenly taken over the industry.
No,
So
it hasn't, but the whole thing is really, I mean, I think what's going on is the technology is moving so quickly.
right,
I mean, when I was growing up, we had LP records and 3 television
right.
stations. And, if you missed a movie, you missed it. You couldn't go
You
get
know what?
it.
Actually, no, that's a fair point. Actually,
Yeah.
as much as I say that I don't think AI specifically has sort of become this wide sweeping thing, technology and the games industry and performance certainly has been had a rapid ascension in terms of its
Huge.
accessibility and the kind of things like look at what you have. I mean, you have your studio at home. The idea that you even have that kind of setup. Look what we're doing right now. Just the notion of this 10,
Yeah.
12 years ago would have been incredibly difficult. I'd be sending you a message in a bottle. It's so
Absolutely.
it is fascinating. And I think actually it's more of I feel like 5 years from now, this would be a very different podcast,
I think you're right. I think that's absolutely right.
you know?
So that are we going to make plans on that now, or do you
I
want to
don't
put
know
that
whether
until
was that some
after?
sort of
We'll be
really
back in
cheeky
5 years,
way.
ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen, to
So
continue
a
this
really cheeky way of
conversation.
me signing you up to something. That's really
It was
funny.
kind of great because you can just imagine if in 5 years from now, basically both of us are artificial creations who are having a conversation.
Yeah,
I
totally.
assume we have to be arguing. It's like, no, nothing ever came of that.
No,
I,
yeah. But I'm a hologram in
exactly,
this.
exactly. We both are.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, Jeff, I mean, what an incredible way to wrap that up. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us for this very first episode of Tag and Bag. This is just our pilot, just our first effort, but we hope very much that you've enjoyed our conversation. And if nothing else, that's what this is going to be a really spirited, lively back and forth, sharing our perspectives and sounding things out on contemporary issues. We're not going to pigeonhole ourselves. It's not going to be something that's just exclusively the games industry necessarily. We want this to be something that's really nice and broad and interesting. And we are so grateful that you've tuned in and checked this out. Jeff, where can people find you? I know we alluded to this a little bit in the beginning, but just to wrap us out, where can people find you right now if they're interested in knowing what's going on?
Well, as I said, I just launched this website, Jeff Steitzer voiceactor.com. And if you go there, you'll find there are all sorts of ways to connect with me. You can write to me. You can get a Cameo through there. It'll send you to Cameo. Does it send you there? I think it does. So that you can book a Cameo if you want to. Or I'm starting, I think, doing one-on-one Zoom calls, which we used to do
Nice.
in Cameo and they don't now, for people who want to spend a little bit more time and having a real conversation like this. Trying to make myself a little bit more available because I find that getting to actually talk to fans face to face is probably as entertaining and pleasing for me as anything I could be doing right now. So
Nice.
that's where I am. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, you can obviously check all of that out. We'll be posting the links up alongside this episode of both our video and audio flavors. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on all the various socials at Burly Bird Media. Everything we post will be going onto there. Jeff, thank you again for your time. This is
Thank
just
you so
episode
much.
1. And yeah, we will see you next time.
Goodbye, folks.